I've sent a couple of emails to commissioners. One of question before the assembly, that includes the public. Public comments when they want to talk, as far as I understand, have to be on the topic. If they're not, the president has every right to come to sit down. And I hope he will, because it gets old having to come here and just badmouth everybody and not get anything productive done. Another one, in debate, a member cannot reflect adversely on any prior act of a society that they're a member of. In other words, even if you didn't vote for it, if the assembly passed it, you passed it. And so bringing it up in every meeting that you didn't vote for a change is unacceptable. And that needs to be stopped. I mean, if in every meeting that at least one commissioner said, I didn't vote for this, but I have done. Now, even if you didn't vote for it, as a member, you passed it. And so you need to stop saying unkind things about that. Reading from documents. If any member objects, a member has no right to read from or ask someone else to read from any paper, book, or part of a speech. In other words, all we got to do to stop someone absolutely reading documents is have one person say, I object. And then you vote on it. If it doesn't get approved, they got to stop reading. Now we've got one more thing that I thought was kind of relevant to this, which is just a general statement, which is the general rules against discussion without a motion is one of parliamentary procedures' most powerful tools for keeping business on track. In other words, if you're asking a question, just ask a question. Don't give it a bunch of preemptive, here's why I want the answer the right way. It's just ask the question. If they don't understand your question, they'll ask you for more detail. Then you get right to be more detail. All that speech making gets to be done during your comments and only during your comments. So if we stick to the rules, the meetings will get done on time. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. That's point well taken. Ms. Nicole David.
I would like to recommend that the Harbor District considers the promotion of the mobile download service as a regular service at the harbors, and possibly as a requirement for boats that you guys know already that they're not removable. These services are called honey barges, which might be a slight stretch of metaphor there, but they have been very successful in reducing and eliminating discharges of waste right into the harbor. I've actually talked yesterday to the San Francisco Estuary Partnership, and they run a program that's called Boating and Education Outreach Days. I believe it's funded through the Clean Vessel Act grant program. And they come out to the leaders in the area and educate the tenants on potential problems, and it also includes the pump out for the tenants. They call those the honey projects. But it has been very successful, and they express interest in possibly including Brooklyn Harbor or Pasadena in their program as a service. And I think it would be a great opportunity the Harbor District to follow up those potential first educational steps with including pump-out services to the lease agreement, and maybe as a courtesy, you pay for the first one and then the tenant would have to pay for the following pump-outs. But I think it's a great opportunity to address the potential problem proactively, and that's why I wanted to bring this up for consideration.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have staff recognition next.
No, you go back to the
Okay. Next item, we have consent calendars items 1 and 2. We have meeting minutes of November 6th and proclamations and certificates of commendation for Lieutenant Lisa Williams, San Mateo County Sheriff's Office, and the District of the Dragons. Mr. Bruno? Oh. Okay. Can I pull item 2? So for item 1, all in favor?
I don't believe it.
I'm sorry. So sorry. So minutes are postponed. So item 2, I just have a minor change to item 2, and that is on the Oyster Point Dragons commendation. I wanted to strike the specific reference to President Bernardo and make it more general to whereas the Oyster Point Dragons promote the sport of dragon boat racing in a safe and enjoyable environment while fostering team spirit and friendship. I'd like to replace that with the President Bernardo sentence. So, anyone may
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Okay, I'm sorry. The Oyster Point Dragons proclamation, if you look at the 1, 2, 3, the fourth whereas,
Yes, I see
in
that.
the original there was specific reference to President Bernardo. And I would like to strike that because this is coming from the entire board and it should not single out any particular commissioner.
Oh, so the actual one that we were given is the change.
Correct.
Okay.
This would be the amended language for your consideration.
So moved.
Here, I hear a motion and a second. Questions? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
President Bernardo, I would like to note that Lieutenant Lisa Williams is in the audience. And for the record, because we do make at least a verbal record, I'd ask that you read the proclamation as relates, the commendation as relates to her. We have just endorsed it, so we pass it around for signature.
I can do that. So, proclamation by the San Mateo County Harbor District to commend Lieutenant Lisa Williams of the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office. Proclaimed by the Board of Harbor Commissioners that, whereas Lieutenant Lisa Williams of the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office has served as the co-side lieutenant, managing the sheriff's substation in Moss Beach since 2010. And whereas Lieutenant Williams will leave this position and take up other duties at the end of this year, and whereas during her tenure on co-side, Lieutenant Williams developed and maintained a productive working relationship with other government agencies serving the entire co-sides, including Pillar Point Harbor and the San Mateo County Harbor District. And whereas under her direction, Sheriff's co-side unit participated in and supported the vessel inspection efforts undertaken by Homeland Security and the U.S. Coast Guard this year. And whereas her leadership has resulted in greater involvement in traffic and safety planning for the Mavericks event, and her support both personally and on behalf of the Sheriff's Office has extended to Half Moon Bay's annual youth summits. And whereas in the community of Princeton by the Sea, Lieutenant Williams has been a strong advocate for code enforcement efforts to improve compliance with fire, health, and safety laws and regulations. Therefore, be it known that the Board of Harbor Commissioners hereby commends Lieutenant Lisa Williams for her contribution to the health, safety, and well-being of the coastside community and the tenants of Pillar Point Harbor, and offers its best wishes to her in the next stage of her career. Witnessed by my hand this 20th day of November 2013. Commissioner, sign by. And would Lieutenant Williams like to say anything?
Commissioners, thank you. Thank you so much for this honor. I'm humbled. It's been a pleasure serving alongside our partnerships with the local agencies and the harbor district. But I remember this one, how we have to work together to accomplish very important work. So thank you all. It's been a pleasure. Bittersweet, but I'm also still
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And Ms. Harris, we're actually ready for her this evening. So if you just stick around. Is there perhaps a representative of the Oyster Point Dragons? I don't know if we have one.
Yeah, we have, Mr. President, we have Shirley Lau and Janet Wong, the Carlos Point Dragons. Yeah, Oyster Point Dragons.
Fantastic. So let me read the proclamation.
Please.
Please come forward. Yeah, ready to if you'd like to say a few words. Proclamation by the San Mateo County Harbor District to commend the Oyster Point Dragons, proclaimed by the Board of Harbor Commissioners that whereas the Oyster Point Dragons have joined the Oyster Point Yacht Club as an affiliate member and are fast becoming a significant part of the Oyster Point marina scene. And whereas in their first year, the Oyster Point Dragons won a gold medal in the Recreation Mixed Division at the San Francisco International Dragon Boat Festival held at Treasure Island on September 14 and 15, 2013, and competed in several other categories as well in this event, which has existed for 18 years and is growing bigger and bigger every year. And whereas the Oyster Point Dragons have brought new boating activities to the marina and have broadened public interest in this exciting San Francisco Bay boating activity and in Oyster Point Marina. And whereas the Oyster Point Dragons promote the sport of dragon boat racing in a safe and enjoyable environment while fostering team spirit and friendship. Therefore, be it known that the Board of Harbor Commissioners hereby commends the Oyster Point Dragons for their contribution to the Harbor District and the Oyster Point Marina community generally. Witnessed by my hand, this 20th day of November 2013, signed by all commissioners.
So, thank you, Commissioners, Harbor Masters, ladies and gentlemen. This is a really honor to be here. We picked our team name Oyster Point Dragon because we wanted to promote this area. We just love this place that is well designed, the ferry terminals, and the new area that is really renovated is really beautiful for us. So we're very touched by this recognition, and it wasn't easy to start a team with just $5 save money. Yes, it was only $5. But along the journey, we have learned a lot. We learned that strong friendship, tremendous determination, and overwhelming support, and a touch of kindness is what got us here. This first year was a big success for us. We knew we made it when we walked on the stage. And in Treasure Island International Dragon Boat Festival 2 months ago, receiving our gold medal in the adult recreational division. We're not professional, but recreational division is now just fine with us. Since we started back in February, Oyster Point Dragon has taken a lot of seasonal and new paddlers paddling around the marina. Our youngest paddler is actually around 5 years old, and our oldest is well over 70. One of the attractions about dragon boating is there's very limited age and physical limitations. Almost anybody can paddle. On our team we have members who are cancer survivors, heart attack survivors, lupus patients, who are all paddling in the same boat with strong paddlers. Those who join the team understanding you can be paddling in the same boat next to someone who are younger, older, stronger, weaker. For every stroke we take it together. We practice patience, tolerance, and respect. It is very important for us. It's not just a sport, but also friendship. Our goal, of course, is to promote the sport of dragon boating in a fun and safe environment, like you said, while fostering team spirit and friendships. Our vision is to expand and promote the sport of dragon boating as a health promotion program, and approach to leadership development, team building technique for schools, corporations, and communities in South San Francisco and Bay Area. Our success this year is largely due to our hard work and teamwork. But our team is not just filled by paddlers and crew. We actually have a lot of families and friends who supported us. People that included all of you here, Harbor Masters, the commissioners, and the residents in Oyster So in the future, for coming year, we really want to bring in, to promote this sport a little bit more by bringing the driving race in this area. And hopefully it will attract more people to the area. And we wouldn't be able to do that if we don't have your support and continuous support for the upcoming years. So I just want to thank you on behalf of our team. We want to thank you very much for your support for this first year, and we made it. And we really look forward to working with you more in the future. Thank you.
I have a speaker card here, but there's no specific item. Perhaps you could tell me which item number. And I'm sorry, I can't read the first name. McCarthy is the last name.
Hi.
Which item is this for?
I actually just wanted to speak about just general topic.
We're really supposed to just stick to the agenda and hopefully, have comments for specific agenda items.
I see. It was about
It's not anything in particular on the
it was
agenda.
about water quality.
Water quality. Okay, I'll allow it. I'll allow it.
Thank you.
And then we'll stay on track.
Thanks. I'll be brief. Appreciate it. I see. Nice to meet you. I'm Jack McCarthy. I live at 400 California Avenue in Las Beach. And I just wanted to briefly, I didn't realize that I had to stick to the items on the agenda. Sorry about that. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm speaking in reference to the line last week in the Bay Review that piqued my interest in the harbor and the water quality along the coast. One was about you guys did a great job of fixing that pipe apparently that was leaking. That was very interesting to me. And also there was another article on the same issue about the disappearance of the Klein Star Station on the coastline and other types of marine life. And I'm very concerned about that. When I live near the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve, just north of the harbor, and it's an issue that spans these districts, these areas. That's what the experts say. It also mentioned that in the article about the pipes, about how the health department might be interested in that sort of thing. We have a creek at Fitzgerald Marine Reserve that very often named as polluted for one reason or another. He called out other things coming and washing into the creek. And I was hoping that I just wanted to bring that issue up. I think it's a big issue for all of us. And if we could somehow maybe coordinate with different groups like Fitzgerald Marine Reserve, coordinating with you folks with the sanitary districts. And I think it seems to be the county health department is really one that we need to, all of us need to try to get involved and be proactive in having a vision to reducing all the different pollutants, metals, carbon, all the things that come in. And they have programs in place, I know, and they're reducing it. But it would be great if you folks could reach out to them maybe, and increase the decrease of pollutions. Because you people play such a central role in that. It's great that you fix that pipe. If you keep doing that, I commend you. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay, I have another speaker card that does not have a number on a specific item. Mr. Cartwright?
I think I work code, right?
Right, but there's no specific item to which you're speaking. Okay, since I allowed it for the gentleman earlier, I'm going to allow it for you. After tonight, though, the next meeting, we're going to be very strict about the specific numbering of public comment, except for the beginning where you could speak, on whatever topic you like. It's just we've moved on from that already, but I'll allow it.
Okay, well, I'm first, public comment. And so I figured that you're going to do the beginning again. And if you go back to having your meetings and time that everyone can make it on time, particularly if you come in the car and some kind of weather and all that, then it would be a sign that everyone can make it without trying to break the night getting it. I just wanted to make a point, like several other people, who are doing their, PRA requests, that mine is third week right now. And I just wanted to point that out, and I think that it's taking a long time, and I know that PRA requests have to be done in a certain amount of time. And granted, I'm not counting business days, but I only did 23. So tomorrow will be 24. And I think that I have a PRA request that I put in today that I specifically went through legal because the general manager is involved in my PRA request. And so if he specifically is involved in that, that's why I didn't ask for him to do it. I didn't ask for that office to do it. And I think you guys need to come up with some sort of system whereas we can go through the legal for the district and have them handle PRA requests. Because number one, the general manager's office has routinely agreed to be an obstructionist office. And then two, that if they're involved in a PRA request, if the information we're asking specifically relates to them or to their office, then it should be able to go to another office. It doesn't make any sense if I said, you know, if I asked you, I'd like to know how many times President Bernardo did exactly this, because we're referring this to President Bernardo. It doesn't make any sense. So you guys really need to address these kinds of things. And part of the reason, or almost the sole reason we do these PRA requests is because of the way that we've been treated by the general manager's office and the lack of transparency by the board, by the general manager's office. So I mean, we are blamed as the reason for the problem, we are the result of the problem. So please look at that. And I'm asking you early on in the meeting to please stand up to your beliefs. And I'm asking you that early on in the meeting so we don't go through what we've gone through the last several meetings. Love you, respect you, and thank you.
Thank you. So we have our counsel here who I'm sure has taken note of our procedures on PRA requests. So he's great. Let's move on to commissioner requests. So why don't I just go right down the line here? Commissioner Olson.
Mr. President, thank you. I know that we have a 3-minute speaking limit to the public, and I'd like to make a motion to approve an item, set an item on the agenda that would call for discussion of how only a particular commissioner can speak on a particular agenda item. And I would move that that be placed on the next general meeting, so that we may discuss a time limit that is practical for commissioners discussing items that are on the agenda, and not motions that are on the floor, which are come under Robert's Rules of Order and have a different criteria. And I would so move that.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? One opposed, motion carries. So that will go on the next agenda for discussion.
And that's all I have, Mr. President. Thank you.
Commissioner Parvon, I have no response. Okay. Commissioner Bresch.
Thank you. So I have a request, and I'm going to make a motion for this, regarding reducing sewage discharge within the Harbor District. And so that includes both Oyster Point Marina and Floyd Point Harbor. So recently I met with representatives of Bay Green, which is a mobile pump out service provider. I met them at the Floyd Point Harbor Tenants Appreciation Barbecue and had some subsequent email exchange. And I learned through the representatives that Pier 39 and Emery Cove are outstanding examples of marinas that have successfully gotten tenants to stop discharging sewage overboard. And then I was put in contact with the harbor masters of both of those marinas. So enforcement policies that include things like diet tablets and holding tanks,
So my motion, yeah, well, I'll just make a motion. I move that we include a report by the harbor master about recommendations and best practices that will continue to reduce sewage discharge from liveaboard vessels on a future agenda. And I know recently, Scott Gritty mentioned that he's got some new ideas for things along those lines, so it's a motion to get an update report.
Just clarification here, if it's an informational report, I don't believe it requires a vote. It's informational, I mean, you're not asking for,
Well, I know in the past that Commissioner Tucker has suggested early wanted there to be a motion when I make requests. I was trying to work with their desired motions. But if we don't need a motion, then, whatever works.
it just was my understanding that if it was just informational, it didn't require a motion. That was my understanding.
Then those remarks would have been brought up later on in the agenda, and calls for discussion from the commissioners. This is the time for motions and things on the agenda.
This is the type of requests, not motions, but requests.
Same thing.
Okay, well then, okay. Because I was gonna make an informational request too, then I'll turn it into a motion, okay.
But we have done, now that you remind me, we have in the past done requests as word motions at past meetings quite a lot. And I think you're probably right, Commissioner Bernardo, that we should be able to make informational requests at this time. They don't have to be motions.
Right, I mean, I'm gonna look to council here. I mean, was the understanding that this particular commissioner's request section just be motions?
That was my understanding.
Well, is there like some rule or policy that stipulates if it has to be a motion or if it can be a request?
My understanding is that if you want to request that staff prepare something for a meeting, you can just make that request to staff.
When
If
would
you-
we do that?
You can do that outside of the meeting, you can do that during the meeting, whenever is convenient. But my understanding is this portion of the meeting is to agendize items that will call for action when they are on the agenda.
I've got a question about that. Commissioners, it would be inappropriate for commissioners to make requests of staff outside of public meetings. So that doesn't make sense to me. We can't ask staff to do work outside of public meetings. That would open up Pandora's box of, individual commissioners asking staff to do this or that, and that would be out of the public view and inappropriate. So I'm not sure what you're suggesting here. Could you clarify that?
Well, I don't fully agree with what you just said. I mean, the staff is here to support the commission. And so if the commission has certain things that they need from staff, I don't think it's inappropriate to interface with staff. That being said, if you want to put something on the agenda for the commission to vote on at the next meeting, this is the time to make that motion to get it agenda.
But how come at the last meeting you let us make a request for reports during the same time frame?
Because nothing precludes you from doing that.
Oh, so we can ask for reports.
If you want to make a motion to ask for a report, you are more than free to do that.
But I mean, no, at the last meeting, we asked for reports without making a motion, and you were there.
I don't remember what you're referring to.
That happened.
I don't.
Yeah, it's in the video. You can check.
But I do want to honor the original vote about requests and motions. So I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm not going to argue it. So let's make this the opportunity for motions, and then if we have informational requests, we can just go ahead and do that.
But when would we make our informational requests?
As council says, anytime, it can be via email to the general manager, it can be.
To request reports, don't we need the board to agree that it's a good idea to have staff work on creating a report?
Based on what I just heard from,
Let me just say, you can make a request of staff anytime. Staff is not under an obligation to actually put it on the next agenda unless you have collectively told staff, put this on the next agenda. So if you want this to appear on the next agenda, then perhaps it is wise to make a motion so the entire commission can direct staff to do that.
Also, agenda item 15 allows us the opportunity to make statements and comments. That's agenda item 15.
I see, okay, I just wanted to.
Split it off.
Okay,
That's what we're having.
got it. I just wanted clarification because I was confused, and so that's why. Okay, I'm gonna have the motion. There is a motion on the floor, on, okay, I'm sorry. Can you please just read it?
But I do feel that I have to get more clarification, because at the last meeting, there were motions made and voted on and approved to put items on an upcoming agenda which are not on this agenda. So I'm just noting that that happened. So we approved items to be placed on a future agenda which are not on tonight's agenda.
And we listened just to we did re-listen to the tape and our understanding was future agenda and future agenda. And I think Mr. Grinnell stated that everything that was discussed at the last meeting, I think it was like 7 or 8 agenda items that came up, that there was no way that they would be able to all be on the next agenda.
So I just wanted to clarify.
Makes sense, thank you. And then Mr. Grinnell, and then we're gonna continue. Mr. Grinnell.
Yeah, I suggest you keep in mind the ultimate limit of the ability of staff to respond to unlimited requests for items. You need to keep in mind always that with the large agendas that we seem to be having with actions, they all require follow-up staff work. Those are based on priorities, presumably, and I think where you leave the door open to individual requests, you're opening up a Pandora's box from the point of view of the ability of the agency to respond. And so it would be my recommendation that in fact you keep to the idea of having the board or a majority of the board decide what you want your staff to do.
So that's very different from what Kai just said.
It is.
Okay.
It is, and I want to make that point because we're the ones who end up having to deal with it.
Okay, so for the purposes of just this particular item, on Commissioner's request, we will keep this to motions, and then if you would like, if other commissioners would like to make comments or statements or informational items, that can be done at the end under 15. Thank you, Commissioner. So, Commissioner Brennan, back to your item. Do you want to
So I'll
make a motion?
restate the motion, since you might have forgotten what it was. And I do want to point out that this motion is to add something to a future agenda that doesn't specify the very next agenda. So it's open there. I move that we include a report by the harbor master about recommendations and best practices that will continue to reduce sewage discharge from liveaboard vessels on a future agenda.
I hear that motion. Do I hear a second? I will second that motion. All in favor, say aye.
I'd like discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Questions, discussion?
I have two comments. The first one is that the Daily Journal, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, published a public comment from our general manager, Peter Grinnell, regarding environmental quality rules, regarding sewage, regarding the Clean Marina certification. That was very extensive, very detailed, bordering almost on boring, but very detailed. And I commend Commissioner Brennan to read that. I think it will answer all of her questions. So I think first of all, it's necessary because we have a report, and it's been a report that's gone out to the entire public in the Daily Journal. Second of all, I object generally to the idea of agendizing without it being the next meeting. I believe that's an abuse of the spirit of the process. If we want to get something on the agenda, it needs to be agendized for a specific time, not just simply some unspecified time in the future, because as the general manager has said, staff is being so overtaxed, they may never be able to get it, and therefore never be able to comply with what is a recommendation or request by the full commission. And two, leaves it open for comment and criticism about not being complied with when there's no specific approval of the commission to have it come back at a specific time. So I think it is, as a process, one one that has too many problems in it, so I'm opposed to the motion for those two reasons.
Any other discussion?
I would like to ask you,
Have you read the ordinance regarding about requirements for liveaboards or for vessels at Hotel Point, excuse me, harbor or coastal point marina? And it still does not answer your question.
No, I'm asking for an updated report. Last time, Scott Rudy talked about this, it was at our last board meeting. He mentioned that he was going to be working hopefully with the Resource Conservation District to do water pulling testing in a couple of additional sites. He's also talked a little bit about, to me offline, about increasing the program of the mobile pump out service and possibly including one free pump out a month. So there's some things in the works that I think as a board we need to get updated on, and they were not included in the op-ed piece that General Manager Linnell published in the Daily Journal. Also, since that publication of the op-ed, there's been an article in the Half Day Review and several, comments and letters that have been published in media regarding concerns about water quality at Four Point Harbor. So I think this is really a good time to get a handle on it and to make it clear to the public, what we are doing. So that's why I think it would be good to talk about this in the near-term future.
Any other questions before we vote? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, was that an aye? Okay, that's 3 ayes, all opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so, 3 ayes, 2 nays, motion passes. Okay, Commissioner Brennan, any other requests, motions?
I have one more. This one I've titled Review of Bill and Claims in Neutral Location. So since the news about the pile of missing checks and other concerns about billings, I've been meeting with Deborah Galarza, our finance director, who's not here tonight, to review bills and claims in advance of each board meeting. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to meet with Deborah Galarza at 2:30 p.m. We had a prearranged appointment. And Marietta Harris, our Human Resources Director, entered the conference room while I was looking through the basket of bills provided by Deborah Galarza. At one point, Mrs. Harris closed the door to the conference room while Deborah was away getting something and told me I shouldn't request invoices related to harassment complaints. I asked her to open the door and she said she shut it because she was discussing confidential HR issues. I told her I did not want to have a back and forth conversation and that I wasn't comfortable with the door closed. She said she had just phoned ADCL and that they
I just wanted to say, is there a motion there?
Yes, there it is. I'm getting to it, but I have to explain this why I made the motion. Does the HR manager get to explain? I'm not
Please,
sure.
let's have order.
So,
Commissioner Brennan.
Marietta Harris said she had just phoned ADCL, which is our council, and that they would provide the billing info I requested, and that I would need to come back and look at it with her. I told Ms. Harris that Jean Sabre, which is our attorney for ADCL, could provide the board with billing info directly, and that I would ask about it at an upcoming board meeting. So that was yesterday. Going forward, I prefer not to review bills and claims with staff. Today, I emailed this request to the board president, Robert Bernardo, and copied relevant counsel. And I did get your email back, Commissioner Bernardo, and I think that if there were these outstanding harassment complaints by staff, that meeting with staff, as you suggested at Four Point Harbor would be fine with me. But I think that it's kind of complicated now, and I think that it really makes more sense to do the review of bills and claims in a neutral setting until these issues, these harassment complaints get sorted out. So I move that I be allowed to review bills and claims at the ADCL office or them at a neutral location without district staff.
That's the motion, so,
You might want to have a discussion with the general manager or the director of finance, if I'm not sure.
right, the director of finance is not here, so I
Finance.
just.
I believe that this is the time to make a motion to get something on the agenda, not the time to make a motion for action.
Well, in the past, I've been told that if it's related to the harassment complaint, that I can ask to do things directly with our council. I think it was Commissioner Tucker who said that. So that's why I thought it would be appropriate to just go ahead and ask versus put it on a future agenda. But whatever you guys think is more appropriate, if you want me to put it on a future agenda for discussion, then we can do that.
So Commissioner Brennan, your motion in essence is to have the ability for commissioners to review the bills and claims in a neutral location, not at the harbor district,
Well, I'm not sure.
or specifically at the ADCL.
At ADCL, because I don't know another neutral location where it would be appropriate to have our bills located.
I just wanted clarification on the motion, that's all.
If there is a better place, then I'd be open to that, but, I can't think of anywhere else where I could review them, where they would be safe, and where staff would be.
Understood. I hear a motion, do I hear a second? Yeah, I'm gonna second that. Discussion. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Okay, 2 ayes, 3 noes, motion fails.
Point of information, Mr. President.
Yes.
I thought I heard paraphrasing, staff complaints. That's a personnel item. I know of no staff complaints. If there are staff complaints and someone knows about them, I would like to hear that as well.
I'm sorry, you're referring to staff complaints?
I'm not sure, but I'm hearing staff complaints. I know of one complaint from a commissioner to the manager, but I know of no staff complaints.
You didn't put it in your packet, and it was provided in your packet, a letter from Liberty Cassidy Whitmore.
I told the standings that those are personnel matters that are confidential.
The letter is confidential.
It starts out saying it's confidential, attorney-client privilege.
Well, you got a copy of it,
That's because I'm part of the parcel,
then you know about
but
it.
it's not open for public consumption.
Well, you just said you know about it, but you
It's
don't
not
know.
something that we discussed in public.
That's correct. So let's move on. Anything that's attorney-client privilege, we should not be discussing this time. So, any other commissioner requests?
That's it.
Okay, and I have one. It was supposed to be informational, but since this kind of discussion happened tonight, I'm going to make it a motion. I would like to put on the next agenda an informational report on just general eviction lien proceedings. How does that work at the Harbor District? Like, how does a lien happen and how does that happen?
Just as a reminder, there's like 4 days between now and the next agenda.
Okay, well then, thank you for that reminder. I will make it for the next one after that. Okay? But that's my motion.
And we really technically only have tomorrow.
Understood. I hear a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much for that.
So you wanted it on the next,
On the, not the one that's in 3 days.
not fourth, the next one.
Yes, please. We are done with commissioners' requests. Okay? Moving right along. Continued business, item number 3. And, let's see, I have one speaking card on that, so why don't we have the report first? Then we will have the speakers and commissioners. So, Mr. Brunel.
Yes, pursuant to board direction, you have before you a list of the potential facilitator candidates that I was able to identify initially. There were 8, 2 of them are not on this list as basically being unavailable. You also have backup information on each of them as requested. There is not information on fees as yet. There was simply not enough time to actually contact any of these except for one. I was able to start the process. But again, that piece of information is yet to come. I did recall that you all had begun discussing the potential for a special meeting to be convened to interview the candidates. And if in fact you choose to proceed with that, then obviously I can get further information between now and then and get it to you ahead of time. Two more quick things to say about this. You will notice that a couple of these possibilities are mediated. The most specific example is the Peninsula Conflict Resolution Centers, and that's what they do. And they operate on the basis of confidentiality agreements in basically an executive session. And as I understand it from council, this commission, when it would need to meet in open session, and so that would eliminate a couple of these possibilities from your consideration. And I mentioned that in terms of your thinking about who and how many you might want to follow up with at a special meeting. If that were the case, I see basically 1, 2, 4. So that's my report at this point, and I would suggest finally that if you do wish to convene a special board meeting with one item in the interviews, and obviously it would require public comment, which would be an open meeting. I would consider that as potentially, depending upon what you decide about another board meeting in December. Otherwise, early and middle of January as a possibility, which might be the most effective anyway because of holiday seasons and people's availability and so on. So that's all I have at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Grinnell. Before we go to questions for Mr. Grinnell, let's have our public comment for item number 3, Ms. Sean Carpenter.
The full packet wasn't available online today, so I have concerns. And this is, after you listen to the wonderful speaker about the driving boat racing, you guys should go driving boat racing together. You guys should really form a team, do that, because I think she can solve all your problems. When you listen to her, she sounded great. Teamwork, and camaraderie, and people can all work together, and she really try that. But actually, I'm just curious, one of you will sabotage it, you'll hold the boat, and you'll all drown together. And that's really sad. But what's actually even sadder, I think, I could be wrong, and I might be wrong here, is I just asked that gentleman what he's doing here, because I couldn't help but notice his badge. And he said he was requested by the manager to make sure things go smoothly. Somebody, please explain that. No offense to you, but I definitely have concerns here. So you take away the TV monitors, and then the next thing you know, there's a cop sitting here in the room to make sure that things go smoothly. So please explain. But I really hope that you guys improve your overall dynamic. You definitely need to find a way to work together. You're not serving the public the way you guys are now. This whole forcing one commissioner to play the modern day high game, and you sitting there constantly all the time not looking at us, and being the, and I mean this in the truest sense, the dictionary definition of a jackass, read it to everyone else last week, you missed it, sorry. And being, all you do is find a way to try and undermine one person and to take them down. And I don't know if it's because they have the highest votes and you've never been elected, and God, I hope you keep that record going, or what it is, but I think that's the problem. You're just out to make sure that you find a way to take somebody down. And you've got here to drink your Kool-Aid, and it's just not working. You're not serving the public, and it's making the public take a backlash against all of you. I like you make decisions, sometimes you agree, sometimes you don't. Good going. But you guys don't come into the dynamic, and a good group functions together. Sometimes you agree, sometimes you don't, but you work together and you work out your differences together. And you don't, you are very, very divided. Very divided. And we see it, and it's not appreciated. And I had an idea, a suggestion to make you function a little bit better. Fire your legal team. You clearly ignore them as it relates to Serena's webpage. And when commissioners give you advice, you ignore them about the webpage and about tasking staff. So if you fire your legal team, you'll save money, and then you can keep Grinnell and Holsinger, who's really your legal team, the one you listen to.
Thank you. I would just like to say, before we go on, going forward, I will not allow obscenities in these meetings, in these public proceedings, and if I hear any more, obscenities at these meetings, I will definitely adjourn the meeting.
Look up the dictionary.
So, I just wanted to say that, and according to Robert's rules, I have that privilege, so I will do it. So I just wanted to put that out there because it doesn't foster the sense of the sense of decorum that I believe we should be having at these meetings. And I said that many months ago, and I want to reiterate it because I noticed that in recent months it's gotten worse. And I don't want commissioners doing it to one another. I don't want members of the public doing it to commissioners. I don't want staff. I don't want any of that in my meetings. And bring that up to the next president, whoever is after me. But during my meetings, I do not want obscenities. I don't want attacks. I don't want personal attacks. If I hear it, I will adjourn the meeting. So on that note, I would like to move on to commissioner questions for Mr. Grinnell. Questions, please. On item 3. Commissioner Holstein, please.
Did you come across any proposed mediators that had any actual clinical training or education in psychology as opposed to corporate team building?
Not yet. If you wish, of course, I can send the search, but not in any of this.
I would just simply state that I think it's going to be helpful to have that as an option. I don't know that we would select that because I see there's some organizations or individuals here that might be suitable. I don't want to prejudge that, but it would be good to have as part of who we interview for this process, to have someone with some actual clinical expertise.
Is that it? Commissioner Tutcher.
Mr. President, I certainly can support having a special meeting with just this one agenda item on there. And I would suggest to the manager that he choose 4 that he feels comfortable with, and that he help us by supporting us with the questions that we may ask that could better glean the information we need from these prospective individuals that can help us come to some kind of facilitation. And I think that should be a single item agenda, and it should be a special meeting.
Peter, I have a question. In your explanation, opening of the agenda, you mentioned that there were 4 that would probably qualify, that could be on the short list.
Well, if you look down the list, I'm basically striking out mediators. Now, there's one at the top who, actually there are 2. Names 1 and 3, if you go down the list, who do mediation but other things as well. And that's more open door, it seems to me. In other words, you'd be asking those folks about their experience and qualifications and readiness to do facilitation as distinguished from mediation. looking at this point, from the top down, Curtis lines, McCracken right. Although Commissioner Colsinger makes an interesting point, if you wish, I could try to locate one or two that have that additional background. Include those, but that would be a decision to you.
I'd be satisfied to leave it to Mr. Goodell's discretion to see if he can find anybody to put on a short list of 4 or 5. If he finds some clinicians that do mediation that he thinks are suitable, he might consider adding that to the short list. But I'd be satisfied with that.
Thank you. Commissioner Carmona, sorry, David. Mr. Brett, questions of Mr. Brett?
Yeah, thank you. So what was the date for the special meeting again that you suggested?
I didn't. I said early January.
Mid, I thought you said mid.
In other words, after the holiday and before the regular meeting, the third week of January.
Could we pick a date so we know when it is?
Your choice.
Okay, why don't we,
I have a couple of questions, so you said I can wait.
okay, Commissioner, do you want to decide the date now? Okay. Commissioners, what dates are good for you? Do we want to keep it on a Wednesday for convenience, so it's easy to remember? Do we want to keep it at 6 o'clock so that it's easy to remember?
January 8th.
Point of information, just to assist you.
Yes.
I'm looking at a January calendar. The regularly scheduled third week of January, that would be Wednesday the 15th.
Isn't that a holiday?
So, a holiday? No. So conceivably, if we were looking at the second week, week of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, as a way, or the following week, the last one of January, 20, 21, 22, 23. I would hold you if it's difficult to decide
Yeah,
that.
you know, I'd really like to do this offline because I think
Yeah.
we're wasting the public's time trying to look at calendars. So why don't we just do this with like, is it Doodle? Is it called Doodle.com? Whatever that thing is where you try to find
Well,
people.
we can use meeting monkey or something.
Okay, so sometime in January, and will these applicant, or whatever we're calling these board dynamics folks, will they be at the meeting so that we can talk with them?
These candidates?
Yeah.
Well, that would be the purpose of it.
Okay.
As I understood it, from the previous meeting, you want to interview.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that we have
Yeah.
and I had a couple of questions. So we've narrowed down, we've eliminated Dana Curtis, we've eliminated Eric, we've eliminated Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center because all 3 of those only deal with,
Mediation.
well, you said the problem with mediation is that it requires some confidentiality agreement. And I know that Peninsula Conflict Resolution Center does have confidentiality agreements with their clients, is my understanding. But
Yeah, we've used that in the past.
You included Curtis.
Yeah.
My colleague just spoke, you included Curtis, correct? You
Yes,
included Curtis.
we did.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
My colleague mentioned.
I thought you included, okay, now I'm confused. So I thought you included Brent Ives, Catherine McCracken, and Paul Wright. Am I wrong?
Those 3 and Curtis,
And Hibbs.
because he does things in addition to mediation. Now, I realize that management training is
Is
not
it Dana
really what
Woman?
you're about here, but again, it's your call.
Isn't Dana a woman?
Yes.
Just said she. Okay, she, okay.
All right, so we've got those four who hopefully can all make this meeting in January. Now, I had a question about Paul Wright. He's on your list. It says on his resume that he has done work for the Harbor District in the past. Could you tell us what kind of work he did for the Harbor District?
Yes, this was quite a few years ago. He did a facilitation effort with the Harbor Commission. At the time, this would have been around 2000, maybe 2001, I can't recall. It was relatively short term. But he did exercise that facilitating role in that process.
Did any of the other three potentials do work for the Harbor District before, or just him?
No, I have no familiarity with any of the others except these initial conflict resolution centers.
Thank you.
I have no questions, so we're going to just go ahead and schedule then these four for sometime in January after commissioners have been polled on availability. And with the understanding from Commissioner Tucker that you, Mr. Cornell, will create some sample questions that we could get, some interview questions that we could ask the candidates.
Correct.
Some leading questions. Okay, thank you. We are now at item 4. I have one speaker's card, so why don't we go ahead and have, it says here report Commissioner Polson. December 18th meeting reconsideration of November 6th decision to hold the meeting. And the proposed action is to cancel the December 18th meeting. So, this is the report to be given by Commissioner Polson.
It's very brief and very simple. In my inquiry, I've determined that it's been more typical for the commission not to meet in the mid-December meeting as a matter of form. I've also given it some thought as well too. My comment on the last meeting was, it seems to me with that meeting being a week before Christmas, to have a late night, weeknight meeting requiring staff's presence, preparation, and attendance would be somewhat screwed-like. And so I, out of consideration and courtesy and thanks to the staff, I think it's appropriate not to have a meeting on December 7th.
Understood. Thank you. So now why don't I have,
There was a second to put it on the agenda, now I'd like to have a second to the motion.
right, there's a speaker's card though, so why don't we do the speaker's card and then have the commissioners deliberate on it. So, Mr. Hall, for this item.
Thank you very much. You all mentioned earlier there's an article in the newspaper. A few weeks ago, there was an article in the Mercury News discussing all your compensation rate. And we all know Mr. Carolano, Mr. Wilson, are one of the highest compensated commissioners for this type of commission out there. Since I've been paying attention to you guys, you've done nothing but try to shorten the meetings. You've made it so that you won't get crazy and taking anymore. You've made it difficult to get resolutions on or on the agenda. You just about done everything you could. You changed the meeting times to be shorter. You made it harder for people to get here by making it start at 6 o'clock. Most of us have jobs at 4:30, 5 o'clock around the areas that are difficult to get here. You're doing everything you can to shorten these meetings, make it easier. And at the same time, you're complaining about all these things you have to do. And that you're all pressed for time, the staff doesn't have time to get ready for the meetings, and that there's so much on the agenda to get done. We spent maybe a half hour last meeting discussing how to get this question on the agenda at this meeting. So we wasted a half hour last time trying to make sure you talk about taking off the next meeting. And so I was thinking maybe you should look more at how you're all doing things before you start taking advantage of the taxpayers. And I have no problem being a smooth. Everybody in this room works really hard, really hard. None of us needs $1,000 for showing up at this meeting. If he does, then he does. When you add it all up, it's $1,000 a week. I don't see any reason why we should be taking out the 18th when we have so many things on your agenda that you can't get to. Thanks.
Thank you. So, Commissioners,
Yeah, I made a motion to not go with December. I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Are there any questions for Commissioner Holsinger on this item? Questions? Question for Mr. Holsinger on this item?
Are you planning a vacation? Is that why you don't want us to have the meeting? Because it seems like our meetings are running late, and if we have fewer meetings during the year, that means we can jam more agenda items onto the fewer meetings that are remaining, and then our meetings, it seems like you want our meetings to be shorter, but if you cancel meetings, our meetings are going to end up being longer. So if this is about your personal vacation and making it convenient for you, I'm not sure that's a good reason to cancel a meeting. So I'd like to know, I'm working that day on the 18th. I'm not taking that day off. And I think most people do work up until the holidays. I can understand if you had a meeting scheduled for the week between Christmas and New Year's and we want to cancel that. But I don't understand why we need a meeting canceled on the 18th.
I have had occasion on this agency and on other boards where I have had vacation, I have had business, I have had a variety of other reasons to miss meetings, and I have not hesitated to do so when my other activities and involvements require it. My reasons for the motion are as I stated.
I just think the public has an expectation that we're going to hold public meetings, and if we start canceling meetings, then that means the meetings that we do have to go really long, and that puts everybody through, including staff, a challenging situation. So, for that reason, I would support keeping the meeting as scheduled.
Any other questions for Commissioner Holsinger? Okay, so roll call, please.
Commissioner Bennett?
No.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Terrabonnet?
Aye.
Commissioner Pepper?
Aye.
President Bernardo?
Aye. Okay, so motion carries. So we will cancel the December 18th meeting. Item number 544 Alhambra Road, Granada property. Mr. Griffin, we have two speaker cards on this item, so we'll do it in this order. We'll have Mr. Grinnell discuss the item, we'll have the speaker cards, and then the commissioner's questions to Mr. Grinnell. Mr. Grinnell?
Yes, pursuant to prior board direction, this item is for you, and it's basically to look more closely at this particular property, which staff had looked at earlier and brought to the attention of the commission when we were considering the patent office lease extension. And there was enough apparent interest on the part of the commission to want to look into it more closely. So we have done that. You have some basic information on the property. We have with us tonight Dave Warden, who is handling the property and who's available for questions. Also, I believe he has a couple of brief words to pass on to you about it. The point to keep in mind, as staff understands it at this point, is that the potential commission interest relates to either or both of renting or purchasing the property. As Mr. Warden has informed us, the property is available for sale or for purchase in our area if we were to want to do that as a district. It's also available for rent. There is one occupant in a portion of the those are the facts. What I have done to maximize your ability to consider this is, again, in response to the commissioner request to put this on the agenda, it's on right now in open session. But I have also taken the liberty of placing a closed session item on for this under the real estate exception in the Brown Act to enable you to meet amongst yourselves to consider certain aspects of both renting and purchasing that would involve negotiations with the owner and manager of the property and potential action on the part of the board. So again, in the interest of expediting your ability to address this one way or the other, I gave you both opportunities by adding the closed session. That will also enable you to consider, and for the benefit of the public who may not be that familiar with the process, if out of closed session you end up reaching some kind of a decision or a choice as to next steps, you would need to report out of closed session to that effect, and then at a subsequent agenda put an item on to publicly establish whatever that decision was for a next step. I think we covered that. So that's before you.
Thank you. So let me see. Okay, item 5, I have 2 speakers. So let's have the speakers and then the commissioner's questions for Mr. Brunel and Mr. Gordon. I have David Gordon, so I guess, do you need to read in order?
Thank you. Dave Gordon, my company is Windward Commercial Real Estate Services. Peter basically mentioned what I had in mind to say. The property is still available for sale or for lease, preferably in that order. And that I and Mike Colliers International are here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. And Sean Cartwright on item 5.
I support moving the admin offices to both sides. I think you guys have been in San Francisco for too long. It's supposed to be a temporary location. From what I heard, it seems like the building's in some condition, and there should be enough space for the admin staff on the second floor, you can run on the other floors. The one thing, you can get some positive cash flow going, instead of trying to leave your fishermen dry and get money on them, you can have rent at the building. It seems like a good idea. I would also say that instead of moving the tons and tons of boxes of storage, I think you said it there, like 150 square feet or whatever, of boxes of storage. I think you alluded to that, Tucker. You guys, before you even move, you can get a temp, you can get somebody for free, you can get an intern, have them sit there and digitize all those records that are sitting there in those boxes. One, it'll help all of us do a PRA request, so it's a selfish request. And 2, you can get rid of all that storage and create a fire hazard. And we can save on those moving costs. So I would really request that that's something that you do before you move. And so it's all a positive. That's it. That's all I got to say.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, questions to Mr. Brunel?
I just have a point of order. We do have a closed session scheduled, and it seems to me that's the appropriate time to elicit information or opinions from the general manager about this issue, particularly since the representative of the owners is here present and has made a presentation. So if we're going to be actually negotiating in some future time, all of the discussion we have and all the questions we have should be in closed session.
Okay. Yes, I agree with that. So commissioners, if there aren't any, are there any questions for Mr. Grinnell? Because I agree that these questions should be in closed session, especially if we're gonna.
question.
Yes, Commissioner Brennan.
So at the last Harbor District meeting, I made a motion to have an agenda item at this, and we were very specific that it was going to be at this meeting, to approve having a special meeting at the actual building. And so that's what I thought this agenda item was supposed to be. And I know that I have been to the building many times because we're not a sanitary district, it's located on the 3rd floor. And not only do they have their meetings there, but the Midcoast Community Council has their meetings there. So I've been there lots of times, I know what the building looks like. But I know not all the board members have been to the building, and I thought it would be useful for the board to check out the space. So I thought that's what this agenda item was supposed to be, but somehow it isn't that, so I'm kind of wondering what happened there. So that's a question for General Manager Grinnell. What happened with this agenda item?
We simply couldn't manage that in time.
You couldn't put it on the agenda, that's all we were gonna do.
Yeah, but this meeting is scheduled to be on this side of the hill in terms of the normal functioning. And this room is reserved, and trying to set it up at that point with everything else we had to do was simply not possible.
If I could just interrupt here, would it be a problem for individual commissioners to look at the property themselves? I mean, do we have to go as like kind of a field trip group, or can individual commissioners just, when they have, when it's appropriate, they could go ahead and check out the property with the help of Mr. Grinnell and Mr. Warden?
Sure.
I'd just like to make sure everybody sees it. I've been there. I think Commissioner Tucker, didn't you go there, or have you been there?
I've been there twice.
And has anyone else been there? I imagine Commissioner Paravano's been there before? No? Okay, so we have 3 commissioners that still need to visit.
Well, he's been there. So there's 3 that have been there.
Oh,
So there's
Commissioner
2 that-
Holsinger, you've been
there's
there?
2 that should go.
Okay, thank you. That was it.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move that. Okay, so we are now at item 6, informational item. And so Mr. Grinnell will give the informational item, and then I have a speaker card. And
Mr.
Sean-
President, I'm going to recuse myself from this item because I have an economic conflict of interest.
Economic conflict of interest, okay. Thank you. So, Mr. Grinnell, just 1 second until we have Commissioner Paravano out of the room. Okay, Mr. Grinnell, please.
Yes. Okay, you have my written report on this item. And I think the most useful way of proceeding on this is basically to ask if you have questions. I tried to lay out the chronology and the reasons for where we're at. I think it's pretty straightforward, and so why don't I just leave it at this point for questions and discussion amongst yourselves.
Okay. Before we get to that, we have Ms. Cartwright on this item.
I got all my questions. How are these buyers defined? Do fishermen who are berth holders count? Are they exempt as suggested by memo from Holsinger? Are these companies with multiple trucks, single people with a private vehicle? Anyone with an F&G book? Is there a threshold for volume? A permit if you buy one time, 100 pounds or more, only semis full? How are buyers identified? Assuming that a definition is determined, how are buyers are identified? I hope you're all taking notes. How is a truck owned by 3 captains or Morningstar and a truck owned by a non-lessee buyer differentiated? What about unmarked vehicles? Is this for private vehicles, semi-trucks? When one buyer has multiple trucks, how is that handled? What about fish walking off at the pier on a truck handled or on a hand truck or driving off on a forklift, etc.? Does that count? How will fees be assessed? Assuming buyers can be identified, which is a big leap. How will the quantity volume purchased be reported and verified? How will these buyers pay fees? Who will calculate the fees due? Is there a minimum volume? Are buyers supposed to pay for purchasing 100 pounds? Stop by the office and pay $1? Will they receive a bill in the mail? Is it the leaseholder at the end of the pier's job to invoice their non-lessee partners? How will this be enforced? Assuming buyers can be identified and volume can be verified, which is, how will this be enforced? Is there a penalty to the 3 leaseholders if they allow people to buy fish without a permit? Is there going to be additional harbor staff hired to inspect and enforce? I'm guessing no. Is there going to be a gate at the end of the pier? Is every vehicle leaving the pier to be checked? What happens if someone is unaware of the system? What if someone knows about the system but doesn't have 30 days notice to get a permit? Will harbor staff impound the truck full of fish? Who will pay for the enforcement? I'm guessing it's the fishermen. It just seems like there's a lot of questions that are going on here, and it seems like most of the answers are going to end up going against the fishermen. And it seems like a lot of those things that are going against the fishermen lately. So these are a lot of questions that I'm hoping you guys will address and really address. And not just put off and put off and put off and put off, which seems to have been the MO lately when it comes to fishermen. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners' questions for Mr. Grinnell.
I have none.
Okay, Commissioner Brennan, questions for Mr. Grinnell.
There are a lot of questions about this policy. When I read through what was included in our board packet, there are a lot of words there, but they don't add up to making a whole lot of sense. I don't know how else to describe it. What is required in this policy? First of all, it's clear from reading through this that we're not enforcing the policy. It doesn't appear to be enforceable, and it doesn't make any sense. So I have a lot of the same questions. You know, how are we defining commercial fish buyers that are non-leasee? Are they people without slips? You know, could you explain that to me?
These are all good questions, and one of the reasons why, in fact, the staff has not implemented the board's authorization is because these questions are legitimate and need to be closely considered in terms of feasibility, how this can actually realistically be implemented and also done on an equitable basis. And so that question and several of the others that you heard, they're all good questions, they're all legitimate, and they need to be indeed seriously considered. And one of the points we were trying to make was that while we started the process of exploring those questions and seeking answers and trying to figure out how we would actually implement this, various other things intervened as indicated, and so it's been taking longer. The questions are still valid and still ultimately need to be responded, and so I think the most useful response I could make at this point would be that it is staff's intention to come back to the board with a full detailed layout of how this authorization could be realistically and equitably implemented. You know, if in the last analysis it turns out that it was a good intention that really can't work, then we'll conclude that and tell you. But I think staff shares the concerns that you've heard. I think they're totally legitimate. The thing has to be done right, but done in the context of the fact that you have people with businesses, with investments. You have fishermen who do what they do, and they in effect are also in business. And there are policies, past policies regarding them. So really, it's the best thing we can say now would be to say, we will come back to you with answers.
When is that gonna happen?
When?
When?
As soon as we possibly can, but I can't tell you the date.
So when you came up with this policy suggestion to the board and the board voted to approve it, why didn't these questions get asked then? How come you didn't think this through before you made a recommendation that the Harbor District institute this policy?
Your assumption's incorrect. The questions were coming up. But basically at the time, the thought was that a statement of intent needed to be made that compliance with the ordinance code on the one hand and addressing a differential in how business is occurring there needed to be addressed. And then thirdly, also, the question of how additional revenue might accrue to the district in an equitable way with respect to fishermen in particular, but everyone in the industry doing business. And that is why the board chose to make a decision to authorize going ahead with this, but not specifying thou shalt now do this right then and there, because as we've heard, there are a lot of questions that do need to be fully answered to figure out how, on a daily basis, one administers something like this.
Well, if you have a basic knowledge, basic level knowledge of understanding about fish buying, commercial fish buying, and you go down to Pillar Point Harbor and you stand on Johnson Pier and you watch the semi-trucks going on and off the pier, and you watch people with pickup trucks going on and off the pier with fish, and you watch members of the public walking on and off the pier with bags of crab or fish. What I see is business. I see revenue coming into San Mateo County, and I think it's a really positive thing for our county and for our district. And what this does, this is a bunch of mumbo jumbo, and what you just said sounded like a bunch of mumbo jumbo, and I'm concerned that there wasn't, your intentions that you just stated make no sense to me. So I would like to hear, what is the real reason why this policy was instituted? Was it because the board wanted to try to put some fear into the commercial fish buyers? I mean, what was this about?
Okay, with your permission, Mr. President, I'll provide a little bit of history. The concern about independent non-lessee fish buyers coming into Pillar Point Harbor and buying fish goes back long before any of the people on this board were in place or any of the staff here were in place. It goes back a long way. And in fact, past commissions have tried to address this concern, because what was happening was people who had spent money, taken out leases, or otherwise were investing in doing business in the fishing industry at the harbor in place, were having competition from people from outside the harbor who had no stake in the harbor, be it a boat slip or a lease on premises, who were simply coming in and buying fish. Meanwhile, their vehicles and their activity was taking place on Harbor District property in that harbor, providing an additional impact on those facilities. So they were making free use of facilities that the Harbor District, with public funds, has to maintain. And so past commissions said, well, wait a minute, we need to do something about this. And so one attempt that happened a long time ago was a harbor commission said, well, okay, you outside independent non-lessee fish buyers can come in, but you're going to need a commercial activity permit, and you're going to have to pay a certain amount that was a premium, more than anyone who had an existing stake in the harbor would have to pay. In other words, they were trying to make the playing field more level, okay? And what that did at the time was to cut back on a fair amount of that independent activity. Anyway, that's still an ongoing question and concern, because for the Harbor District, of which you have a fiduciary responsibility in terms of looking after, by you I mean the board, have for facilities maintenance and so on, you know, you need to find funds to maintain that. And so here seemed to be a potential for getting some more revenue from people who are using the harbor, making an impact on its facilities, but not paying anything for it. So that's the basic intent behind this. Now the question then is, and the questions that Ms. Cartwright raised, they're all good ones.
I have another question.
Anyway, I'm trying to answer your question
Sure.
here and say that in fact, one needs to indeed look to see if in fact there is a feasible way to actually address this question. We think there probably is, and do so in an equitable way. The comments about, well, the fishermen are gonna get dinged, no, we don't see that happening at all. On the other hand, we do feel that we need to find our way through this. To call it mumbo jumbo, I think, is unfair. It's a complex situation that does require some detailed consideration of how we do it. And so, let me stop there.
Okay, so when you say free use, you're suggesting that there's a problem with non-leasing fish buyers coming onto the pier and purchasing fish from our 3 commercial fish buyers with leases.
I didn't say that.
But that's what that suggests.
No,
What do
I
you
said
mean?
they can and do purchase from whoever, not making any assumptions as to who they purchase from.
But that would be included in what happens at Johnson Pier, correct?
Sure.
Of course.
Sure,
Okay,
but
so,
that's not the sole activity going on.
but that is a big part of it. So
I'm not using adjectives.
when FedEx comes over to my business and picks up a package for me, I don't have anybody, some overarching thing happening where they have to pay an extra fee to come to my business. So what I'm pointing out here is that, didn't you consider that by charging these non-leasing fish buyers who have to pick up the fish from our fish buyers with leases, that would create additional costs for them, because the fees are just gonna get passed down to our fish buyers with leases, and then in turn, they're gonna pass down those fees to the commercial fishermen, and we've already got the highest fees in Northern California on our commercial fish buyers. So when you double it up, it's just compounding the problem. And so I don't understand how this came about. It seems like bad policy to me, and I don't understand why it wasn't explained that way to the board.
and why they were asked to vote on this. I wasn't on the board at the time, but it's frustrating, and I think that because it is complicated, I'm getting the impression that staff may have thought that they could just sort of slide this one through without the board really understanding what they were voting on. And I'm not the
Point of
only.
information, Mr. President, I think that kind of comment is totally uncalled for.
Yes, Commissioner.
Denigrating of staff, the board was at the time, was taken in full confidence in this whole thing. In fact, there were initiatives coming from the board itself, and I resent this kind of comment, and I wish it would stop.
Point well taken, and yes, let's please not insult past commissioners, present commissioners, commissioners who, let's just keep it to questions if you have a specific question for Mr. Grinnell.
It's been hard to figure out what is going on with this policy. I have spent countless hours working on this and talking with various fishermen in Pillar Point Harbor. I've talked to fish buyers. I've talked to non-leasee fish buyers. I've talked to fish buyers with leases. And everybody that I talk to agrees that this policy is bad. So I don't understand how this could happen. I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions, Mr. Grinnell.
Mm-hmm.
My first one is, first of all, thank you for the informational report. Second of all, and maybe this will be answered in a future agenda item, but are you looking to the board based on what you just said and based on your informational report, are you looking to us for establishing some sort of a framework? Are you asking us, I guess what I'm asking is what do you need from us to help you move forward with this item? Is there anything you need from us tonight?
At this point, nothing. I think it's our responsibility and commitment, as I said a bit earlier, to come back to you with what amounts to an implementation procedure. That's bureaucratic language, but basically it's how could we implement this thing? And if we can do so and show you that it's workable and that it's equitable and that it accomplishes the basic objectives and complies with existing rules and ordinances and so on, then it's a go. If it turns out that in fact it's something that really is too problematic, then we will say so and we'll come back to you and suggest that the board reconsiders and say, well, maybe this doesn't work and should be passed. But that's our intention. So right now, we need nothing from the commission.
Thank you. And I would just like to lastly say on this that the guide that I would use would be the special events policy. The special events policy
Yes.
as a guide, as sort of a guiding document, because I think that was really, outstanding in terms of all those considerations. About fairness,
Thank you, Mr. President. That is
that's an example of a document that handled it well in terms of fairness, fees, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could just make sure that.
Sure. And it takes time to do that kind of thing. Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
Sure.
For that informational item, we are now at number
Mr. President, I suggest we take a break and then we can get Commissioner Caravano back in.
Oh, yes, that's right. Let's take a 5-minute break, please. Thank you.
That's been my past.
Yeah,
You know, it wasn't part of my decision, but all I can tell you is what I heard. I heard what you said. But I think it was on the record, so the minute the video will show.
there was. Okay. We are back. And we are back at item number 7. So item number 7, we have amend commercial activity permit for Cynthia Kerr, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, Princeton Waters. Mr. Grinnell?
Peter?
They're calling you.
Peter. Oh, Peter. Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Grinnell, we're at item number 7. The CAP for Cynthia Kerr, Princeton Waters.
Yes, you have our report in front of you. It's staff's recommendation that this requested amendment to add an additional day of activity to the operation would not cause any adverse impact on harbor operations, and staff recommends approval.
Thank you.
I would so move, Mr. President, for three basic items.
I hear a motion and a second. There's no speaker cards on this. Are there any questions from the commissioners?
I have a question.
Commissioner Brennan?
Okay, so I'm a little confused by this because item 7 and item 8 are both for the same person? Is that
That's correct.
Okay.
She made 2 requests.
So she wants to extend her current business by 1 more day a week
That's correct.
for the hair salon?
Yes.
Okay. And then in addition to that, she also wants to operate a motel as well as the hair salon?
Yes, but that's a separate item.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand if she wants to do 2 businesses on one boat, or if it's one business and then maybe the other business if this, I'm just confused.
I think we best take that up with the second item, item 8.
Call for a question on the motion of the item number 7.
Okay, let's have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye?
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Peravano?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
President Bernardo?
Aye. All opposed? None? Motion passes. Item number 8, commercial activity permit for Cynthia Kerr, Princeton Waters, to operate a short-term motel on her vessel at berth E25 at Pillar Point Harbor. Mr. Grinnell.
Yes, indeed, Ms. Kerr is requesting approval for a second activity to take place on the same vessel. It's a different kind of activity, as you can see from the report. And in reviewing this, the staff took into account previous considerations for similar types of activity for which past commissions have not approved such activity. And while the commission has not adopted a specific policy about this type of use, nevertheless, the question of whether there should be one did come up. And it's staff's feeling that unless and until the Harbor Commission provides guidance at a policy level about this, it's staff's feeling that we should not be recommending it at this point. If the commission at some point thinks that in fact this might be beneficial and adopts some kind of a policy that takes into account that kind of activity in the context of a working commercial fishing order, then so be it, staff will implement. But it's staff recommendation to not approve at this time.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, questions?
Some questions. Mr. Grinnell, do you see this kind of commercial activity in either facility becoming appropriate at any time within the near future, within the next couple of years?
You know, I haven't given, to be totally frank, I haven't given it that much thought. I would have to say, since you put it to me, no, I don't. This has been the only recent request, very recent request for this. Again, I'll make a point that it's not a major request, but I think when you talk about either facility, if we're talking Oyster Point, we are aware that the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission, a regulatory body, has certain concerns about uses on boats. For example, they have a very strict policy limiting liveaboards to 10% of occupancy. And what they're getting at is that boats that don't move are like docks filled in their parlance, and that has potential environmental impacts, and that's where that stems from. So the idea that, and it's idea I underline, that you have an activity where a vessel is sitting there basically being a floating hotel, and you can call it whatever you want, but that's what it is in this context, raises questions, and I know the Coastal Commission also has certain concerns about that as well on the coastal side. So those are things to think about. As I say, we have not received any recent things. Just to take it one step further, because staff has discussed this briefly at the time, and that is if you were allowed by policy to have floating offices, for example, we believe that we could fill Oyster Point Marina to full capacity tomorrow and make a lot of money off it. We're not allowed by BCDC policy. Again, you're changing the nature of the marina into a floating business park, and there's a question there as to whether the city of South San Francisco has this in mind and so on. There's a whole bunch of related questions. Pillar Point Harbor, similarly. So I think if one thinks, well, maybe you might want to contemplate a policy, there are a bunch of variables you'd want to take into account.
Final question. Do you envision a consideration of this as being part of our strategic planning process that we're about ready to undergo?
I would, and I would immediately place that. You can look at it in a couple of different ways. I would see that in the context of potential opportunities for new revenue.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to make some comments on this. First of all, Peter, I think that this commercial activity permit is for Pillar Point Harbor and not Oyster Point.
That is correct.
So all the concerns about BCDC are not directed at this, directed at this commercial activity permit.
That's basically correct, yes.
So my comments on this is that this does present us with a fairly innovative and creative opportunity. We were first brought this by Ms. Kerr years ago when she first offered to have hair salon services at Pillar Point Harbor. And I think we can all agree that since then, this business enterprise that she operates has been nothing short of being successful. And I've heard many, many comments that support her cleanliness, her friendliness, her success in treating customers her relationship with the harbor staff, with the harbor patrolman. Her maintenance of her boat has been impeccable. So I would like to see this more coming from an angle of, let's try it. And maybe put one of those situations where it's new for all of us, and like you said, we don't have a policy that addresses boat dells. I don't think many harbors and marinas do. But there's a changing society, there's a changing need of working waterfronts that allow for this type of creativity. So I would like to explore the possibility of maybe doing this on a probationary period of time to see if based on her good relationship with the Harbor District, that we try navigating through this together in terms of trying to make this an opportunity for her and for the Harbor District.
Go ahead, Mike.
Mr.
To
Gordon.
respond. Interesting point of view. A couple of things come to mind. One would be if the previous applicant for a similar activity then came back and said, well, now can we have one? Would we then feel that we should have a second one? And if so, what about a third? And what about other non-boating uses and so on? In other words, I think the question of policy, which was raised earlier by someone on the commission, is something to think about. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with your view here, but staff felt that it would be a little premature for us to simply say, let's go try this, recommended, so on and so forth, given past history and given implications. Because then we might be coming back to you with a bunch of other things and on what basis. And that's why I felt obliged to emphasize the policy implications of this.
Yeah, I agree with that. We did have that applicant, but I think it was just kind of a different premise in terms of this commercial activity permit. Ms. Kerr already has an existing boat at a berth in Powder Point Harbor. So the conditions the situation's a little different. And I think we have a long-standing relationship with the business, with her, and with the boat. So those are three components that I think would kind of encourage us to look at her proposal in a little bit more positive way of trying to get this established. I'm not, I don't think that anybody here is going to give it a full blessing because we don't know exactly what the outcome is going to be. But if we can put some guidelines and some parameters on this commercial activity permit, we can move forward together.
Yeah, well, let me just follow that up if I may. I don't want to monopolize here, but let's assume that the board says, okay, let's approve this on some kind of a trial, interim basis, whatever. Fine, and it carries on and it seems just fine. The concern that we have is not so much with that as to what else, what next, and on what basis. That's the real question.
And that's where policy dictates that, and I think...
Well, if you have a policy, right, that we
Well,
don't.
we did, when it comes to commercial activity permits, I think this board has addressed commercial activity permits, the number, the categories, pretty well. And I think that we can continue that type of an approach toward commercial activity permits. And, with this proposal. I don't know, those are my comments. My colleagues are going to decide.
Any other questions for Mr. Grinnell?
No.
Thank you. Commissioner Bryant.
Thanks. So I was reading this letter from the applicant, and so I understand that the concept is an online booking service, which would be Airbnb, which probably many of us know about, maybe not everybody here, but it's a very popular website where you can book accommodations at people's homes. I don't think I've ever seen boats on Airbnb, but I probably just missed that part. And I know people that have used it, and it's really, really popular right now. And I imagine that that service is just gonna keep growing. So it's an interesting concept. I think the things that I would be concerned about are what's the story with the pump out situation? We've had issues with sewage dumping. Not to suggest that this applicant had any part of that, but you know, if we were going to allow some new uses of boats that included something like Airbnb, wouldn't it make sense to have strict requirements about pump out and have to have regular service? Or is there a way that we could ensure that there wasn't any problem with people who are not familiar with boats doing the wrong thing on the boat and creating some sort of debris or water contamination? Those are the kinds of things that I would be concerned about. And I haven't heard Scott say anything yet, and I know this is something that you would be dealing with more on a day-to-day basis. So I'm kind of wondering if you have some thoughts on, I know there are other harbors that do allow this, because I've experienced that at other harbors, but just wonder what your thoughts are so far.
For lack of a better way to call it, first blush of the question. I agree with Peter's concerns, however, my concerns are more of a, what have, you know, if I think of a motel, say Motel 6 or something like that down the street. When you have an issue of someone staying on the boat, who's the service provider? Usually there's somebody there, it's the night manager or whatever, sewer pipe breaks, whatever, they're right there. And I don't think we really have that spoken to. We, you know, so as your environmental issues, could be a pipe on the boat, could be a water line, could be a power thing, or fire or others. You know, I think that there's a safety consideration that I'm very worried about, from environmental safety to whatever, that big package. I think also if we were to do anything, there needs to be some kind of policy, almost like a hotel policy in it, because it's different than if you're a live aboard or something, in the sense of how our policies work there. What gives me the authority to, you know, I have to go through the ordinance codes, and what gives my staff authority if all of a sudden there's a problem on any boat that might be a you know, hotel type setting, if there's a fight or other, you know, how do I deal with it? Because I'm not the one reserving the boat. So I don't know who's on the boat. I'm not the you know, I'm not the owner of the business on the water. So if all of a sudden there's a fight, you know, I could have two people both saying, well, they're the ones that reserved it, and maybe I couldn't get a hold of the owner of the business. Now I have to make decisions that may not be, you know, people will be coming back complaining about our decisions, we had to make it the spur of the moment. So I think the policy pieces are a big piece for me. Okay. Operations and policy, I should say.
So is the applicant here tonight?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm wondering, you know, it seems like maybe the applicant might have thought through some of these, you know, concerns and might have considered some contingency planning, or have, you know, I don't know, I'm just trying to visualize how I would do it if it was my boat, you know, cell phone number, and a cell phone always turned on in case there was some sort of emergency situation, so that they would be able to come and deal with it. But if they weren't in close proximity to the boat, obviously that could be a problem. Would it be possible for us to hear from the applicant? Is that okay?
Yes,
Thank you.
please.
I'm dying over here.
Come up and just for the record, state your name and then
I'm
address.
Cynthia Core. I have a commercial activity permit on E25. And we're all very hardworking on E-Doc, I might get on that. So, yes, as far as being on call, I'm on call. Airbnb is a heavily filtered a site. They have to have an online presence. You can put a number of filters in place to prevent yourself from getting in any kind of trouble. Nobody wants to be, I do not want any trouble at all. I'm very protective and probably over caring about my boat. I'm there when they check in. They have a strict window time, or they're, I'm there when they check out, and I'm on call the whole time. It's only for couples. It's a houseboat, not a boat-tow. I take offense by that. It isn't a boat-tow. You can call it what you want, but I felt offended that was put in there, because it really isn't a boat-tow. I don't want to give you that impression. It's a houseboat on the water. I'm looking for a help with a little bit of income on the weekends, because the tourism has become so heavy there, and my clients don't want to come in on Saturday and the weekends at all anymore, not even Fridays. So I'm looking for something to supplement the 2 nights. So I sort of came up with the idea and recommendation from several other very good business people that are clients. I didn't really believe that it was a good idea, but after working on it a year, which it took me a year to put this together, and I put every type of feel safe in there that you can imagine, and re-outfitted the boat, repaired everything, and it's ship-shape for both. I'm able to morph it out at the end of the day on Thursday and have it ready for clients on Friday and Saturday. It's a lot of work, frankly, but it went. I did try it because I wasn't going to come here and apply for permits. I used my nights of the week and tried it for 7 weeks actually, and it was incredible. The people were so polite and very careful with it. I walked them all the way through the boat. This you do, this you don't do, nothing, I don't want any noise after 8 o'clock, or, it's not allowed here after 8 o'clock. Don't disturb the neighbors. And actually I've had several fishermen approach me and ask if they can bring their families up, if they can stay for the holidays. So I think, it's a brotherhood there. We all work together. And they approved of it, and I was really, frankly, pretty surprised how well it went over with the public. But it's very, very carefully done.
Do you, are you signed up with a mobile pump out service, or how do you?
2 times a month.
2 times a month.
Also, it's locked for the salon, so it has to be pumped out for that anyway. So you have all your fail safes. There's just no way to poke a hole in it from my perspective, as far as any way that you could be an environmental impact, or it's just 2 nights a week, and I don't use it ever. I'm always working there. So I would be grateful if you would allow it on a temporary basis, just to see if anything, you could find anything at all wrong with it, and I would gladly step down. Otherwise, I really feel that this is a good idea. Is there anything else I can answer?
Commissioner Tucker has a question.
Did I understand you to say that for the past 7 weeks you've rented out the boat?
I tried it before I flew it. I used my nights of the week, which I felt like I have 3 nights a week that I can use for myself. So I tried it, and it was a lot of work. But I had to see if really this was a thing you could even do. This is a lot to take on. But I had it running really smooth. And
Any repeaters?
And one thing I didn't do, I did not go under the table. I didn't have any sneaker board kind of thing, or I just let it go. I managed it, let it go to see what would happen. To see if, okay, they approached the harbor patrolman for directions, and I have a way to remedy that. But I didn't try to overdo it, you know what I'm saying? I tried to manage it just from a...
Did you have anybody stay like more than 1 weekend, come back and visit again, having had a good
No,
experience?
I didn't have it operational that long.
7 weeks.
So there's a lot of people that like to come back, but it's sort of thing you have to earn too. You have to have a good online reputation. You're able to research the people. They're able to research me. I do something wrong, I get reported online. They do something wrong, they get reported, and then you're black marketed from running anywhere else. So.
Is there a motion?
I did not, thank you very much.
Okay.
I did not hear.
Thank
a
you.
motion.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve this commercial activity permit with the assistance of the harbor master in terms of the safeguards and guidelines regarding the noise, the sewage discharge, and let it go for a year to see if this is an asset for the harbor district.
I'll second the motion. I hear a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Holsinger? Commissioner
Aye.
Holsinger? Commissioner Parravano?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
President Bernardo?
Aye.
It's gonna be interesting.
All opposed?
Yes.
None. Motion passes. And congratulations, Mr.
I would have liked 3 months, twice a month.
Okay, we're at item number 9, purchase of 2 replacement trucks from the State of California purchasing bid contract. Mr. Grindy.
Sure. Okay. What you have in front of you in this report is, I've asked staff to go out and research the state contract. We had the budget that was approved this year for 2 vehicle replacements, one at Oyster Point, one at Pillar Point. Using the state contract, you do not have to go out to bid. It's already been done by the state of California, so you get the volume discounts that you would get because it's the state volume versus one agency. I'll take any questions.
So moved.
Hear a motion, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Hear a motion second, any questions? Okay. Since this involves money, let's do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Parravano?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
President Bernardo?
Aye. All opposed, none, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grindy. Item number 10, bills and claims in the amount of $1,660,821.43. Mr. Treasurer.
Mr. President, members of the commission, I reviewed the bills and claims, and I would move their approval with the mention that the larger amount this time is because of the $1.4 million Department of Building and Waterworks payment on the loans we have outstanding. So I would move approval of the bills and claims in the amount of $1,660,821.43.
Thank you. I hear a motion. Do I hear a second? I hear a motion and a second. Any questions on this item?
I have a question.
Okay, Commissioner Brennan.
Okay, so the large payments to boating and waterways, are those, how do those come up usually? Oh, I guess Deborah's not here, so I can't really ask
They
that.
do every December by contract.
Oh, I see, okay. That was my only question.
Thank you.
And I would point out, if I may just speak one further item on
Please.
the motion.
Please, Mr. Treasurer.
This will bring our debt to the Department of Building and Waterways down to $7.1 million from $19 million. Quite an undertaking.
Thank you.
Through the
And
board, it's due on December 31st, and so we usually send it out Federal Express like a week or two prior to that, because we want to know, we want to know that they get it.
That's really getting into the weeds.
Signed,
Thank you
sealed,
for
and
getting into the
delivered,
weeds.
so,
All right, I hear a motion and a second. Roll call, please, since this involves money.
Commissioner Brennan?
Aye.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Parravano?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
President Bernardo?
Aye. All opposed, none, motion carries. Items, let's see. 11, 12, and 13, those are staff reports, admin, and finance. So, Mr. Brunel. Ms.
Yes,
Galarza, and
Mr. President, you have my report. I'll take any questions on it. I just want to mention that on the district website now is the PowerPoint presentation from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers San Francisco District, which they presented on November 8th at the Surfers Beach public update meeting. And so that is available for the public and anyone else who wants to look. That's all.
Thank you. Ms. Gallarz is not here. Ms. Harris?
You have my report, I'll take any questions. I'll take any questions for the finance director as well, I can let you know if you have any questions for the report.
Thank you. I have one speaker card on item number 11, general manager's report. So let me just have Ms. Cartwright on number 11, which is the general manager's report.
Now I'm gonna hear you. There you go. Okay. Really quick, I just wanted to say, or I wanted to ask, when is the new website, if I remember right, you guys are working on a new website? When's that gonna happen? And I'd like to ask, how much does he cost every meeting? And on the PRA request, the cost of it, you talk about cost of it, or I'm sure you're going to, and that the things you guys decide what can and can't be redacted just seems like, it's like dealing with the Pentagon, and it's like the biggest magic marker that you've ever dealt with. And I think that it's a little bit ridiculous. And I just want to reiterate that the reason we do so many PRA requests is because you guys seem about as transparent as a brick wall. And that when we ask for these PRA requests, I mean, some of us are waiting over a month to get these answers. And it's like Stonewall, Stonewall. I'm not referring to mine, just so you know. Because I know I just saw you like, rrr. I was like, I'm not saying mine.
I'm looking at you as you always
Okay.
request.
I appreciate that. So, I mean, these PRA requests take a long time, but the reason that we ask for these things is because we generally ask a question, or, you know, and we don't get a response. Or when we ask for things here, these answers don't come. So it falls upon us to become investigative journalists, to find the answers that aren't being found up there, or we can't find with simple information, because we're constantly being blocked. And you know what? I appreciate you guys looking at me when your own boss doesn't look at me. So I really appreciate that. I really need to make a point of that. I really super appreciate that. I really do. I mean that with no sarcasm. But it falls upon us to do the job of investigative journalists for you, actually, and for the voters, and for the people who live in the county, to find these answers, because there is no transparency. So to sit there and say, oh, do we need to hire a full-time person to handle PRA requests? What you need to do is hire a new general manager so that you have more transparency, somebody that isn't blocking harbor commissioners, isn't blocking the public, and then you wouldn't have so many PRA requests. You as commissioners need to be more transparent, you need to demand more transparency from your staff, and then you wouldn't have so many PRA requests. That's what's happening. And to say that you might have to hire a full-time person to handle the PRA request is ridiculous. If you had more meetings, then you'd have more things, you wouldn't have so many things compressed into a small agenda. We wouldn't have all these PR requests. Remember, we react to the Stonewall tactics.
Thank you. Ms. Harris, you were finishing up on your item, I believe.
But I'll take any questions.
Okay, Commissioner, sorry about that. Commissioners, any questions?
I had a question for the general manager, or
Okay.
I guess a point that I think he missed in his report that he might not be aware of, and it seems like a good time to raise it.
Okay, it's a question, yes.
Did you know that there's going to be a sea level rise meeting on Monday, December 9th at 8 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. at San Mateo College? Don't know if you know about that, but it's something that we might want to let the public know about on the Harbor District website, because sea level rise is definitely going to be a big impact at both Oyster Point Marina and Pillar Point Harbor. So again, that's Monday, December 9th, 8 a.m. to 12:30 p.m.
Commissioner Brennan, if I may, I believe that both Mr. Grinnell and Harbor Master Grindy had brought that up to me, and that I believe Harbor Master Grindy will attend it. I believe Mr. Grinnell will attend it. He did bring it up to me, and I had just forgotten about it. It's the one where, I believe.
Dave Pine says.
Dave Pine, right, and Congresswoman Spear, or,
And Rich Gordon.
right. So, yeah, they're aware of it, sorry.
Oh, great, so you guys are gonna be there? Great, okay, and then for the HR report, it's always strange that we're doing Wi-Fi at this time, but, I know we talked about Wi-Fi recently, and it seemed like we got some clarification, maybe there was some confusion on the part of staff, and I wondered if there was an update on when Wi-Fi was coming back to the board, when it would be on the agenda.
Have a conversation with my general manager. I will have a conversation with my general manager on my priorities.
Is that are we gonna get an email from the general manager telling us when that's gonna be on an agenda so that we get something concrete? Because we've been waiting for about 8 months now.
We can let you know when it's going to be available.
What does that mean?
It means exactly what I said.
So when are you gonna let me know, and when are we going to do it? Can I get something specific as
Not
far as
yet.
a date goes?
No, I cannot give you a date
And why can't you give me a date?
because we're working on higher priorities. And
Can
when
you
we're dealt
move
with,
it up?
and we're done with those, then we will be able to address that.
8 months? Maybe it's even longer, maybe it's 9 months, 10 months? I don't know, it's getting close to a year. So can you move it up the priority chain?
If the board so wishes.
The board's already told the staff to present a report, and so we're waiting.
Mm-hmm. And you'll get it when it's ready.
So we'll get it when you're ready?
When we have written it.
When will you write it?
When we complete the research on revenue opportunities.
Have you started the research?
Ms. Harris?
I started some of it, but there's been a lot of other things, like I said, we have other priorities. So if the board would like to make that a priority for me, then through my general manager, then I'll be happy to work on that.
President Bernardo,
Yes.
when we voted to move that forward, what's going on here?
You know, I'm not gonna speak for staff and their priorities, because I know they're also getting PRA requests and dealing with other things, so I'm not going to speak on their behalf. They will get it. I'm hearing when they're ready to tell us that they can provide us a report.
So it's fine with you if the board requests a report that it take a year to produce it or more?
The board has made a lot of requests, Commissioner Brennan, on staff, and Wi-Fi is just one of them. So I'm not going to, at this point, take up the entire meeting debating what is the top priority, but they know, staff knows that it is a priority.
Well, I remember
So-
when you wanted the events policy moved forward, because that also took a long time.
Right, and also Commissioner Brennan, during that time, I believe their workload was not as much as it is now, if I'm not mistaken.
But
I'm
I do
not gonna
recall
speak for them.
you telling staff that they needed to get that finished.
Well,
and
so
that you were
did my
tired.
fellow commissioners,
And then,
yes.
no, I remember you had a moment of feeling very strongly about that issue. I recall that meeting and directing staff to get on it, chop, because you've been waiting for so long. So it seems like the board made a directive to staff.
Right.
We shouldn't have to wait a year to receive the report back. That seems completely unacceptable. We shouldn't be moving forward with other things if we can't even get that finished. That was such an easy task. So I'd like some support from the board to direct staff to complete that task so that we can move forward with the other things that have also been requested. It seems like that keeps getting put on the back burner and not prioritized.
And it does feel that way. However, again, I'm not going to speak for staff on their workload, okay? Because it would be unfair for me to do that. And they clearly know it's a priority since we're having this discussion right now. I mean, so I don't think that it would be useful to have that type of discussion.
Well, maybe we should put it back on the agenda.
Okay, if colleagues would like to go ahead and make that motion and place it on the agenda, we can do that.
I can't make a motion for that right now,
Okay.
but I think we should. I think we should put it back on the agenda, and I'll make a request for that at the next meeting.
Sounds good, thank you. And staff clearly has the direction that it's a priority for the commissioners, definitely. So any other questions for Mr. Grinnell?
That was it.
Thank you. Moving right along on operations, Mr. Grindy.
You have my report. I think one of the things I want to remind everyone, just for the sake of reminding, is that we do have the Harbor Lights event in December, being we won't have another meeting after the, I'm trying to just make sure I say to the public here, that, you know, we have another event coming up, and I want to make sure it's a success. But you have my report. I'll take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Grindy? Okay. Thank you. We are now at item 15, which is committee reports, commissioner statements. So why don't we start over here on the right? Commissioner Brennan, reports and statements.
Yeah, I was at Johnson Pier recently and observing the, what I like to call the boat graveyard that's near the work dock, and
Lean sailboats.
okay, lean sail boats. Those boats, it seems like every time I go, it seems like they're the same boats, but maybe they're different boats. But anyway, how long have those boats been there? And
Well,
what's-
I can speak to that.
Yeah.
Easier to answer a bit quicker. The lean sail for Pillar Point was today, and I don't have it right in my back pocket, but I believe it's next Wednesday for Oyster Point. And so those boats go us through a lean sail process that occurred today, and then whatever boats didn't sell, there's a period of time before we can eliminate the boats or do other things with them. Typically, if it's a boat that's, I'm gonna say garbage boat, like we've had in the past, then through boating and waterways, et cetera, there's funds to dispose of those boats. And we had to go through a due process before we can get rid of a boat. So you're gonna see probably, this is what, middle of November, so we're probably looking at probably the middle of December somewhere with all the tax and lien stuff and the paperwork that goes with it, may end of December. That either some boats be crunched or disposed of or other.
Will there be other boats put in?
Filling back in.
Yeah, how's that?
The lien sale process, it really depends on who abandons the boat.
Yeah.
The guys from the harbor group this is Wednesday, so Monday, discovered a boat that was sunk at the boat ramp and was in about 15 feet of water. One of the tenants noticed it in their sonar, reported to us, we pulled it out, and it was definitely a piece of trash, but it was the hulk of the boat, no motor or anything on it, and so they had to cut it up and crunch it and get rid of it. So things show up. That's part of the problem, I guess I'm trying to state. And whether they abandon it, we had one boat that was abandoned just recently with motors, you know, dead motors, but they dropped it off and stripped it and then said, here, it's yours. And, you know, it's defrauding an innkeeper type mode, and there's processes we have to go through for that. So everything's got a due process because it's a licensed vehicle, so to speak.
I see. Okay, thank you for explaining that. And one other thing related to your report actually was with regards to water quality, I noticed that you stated here that you were going to be working on developing emergency and spill response action manual for both locations, Outer Harbor draft for ordinance code updates to improve overall water quality, and process for board approval in 2014. So that sounds interesting.
That's going to be probably part of the report that was just asked for, more of an informational piece. One of the things that we do every year, and I don't know if you were here during that last time we did ordinance code updates, but we typically do it every year. when we go through the ordinance codes, I pull staff from both sides together, we do almost like a, the whiteboard type thing, okay, what things do we need to change, what do we need to add to improve? And a lot of it was focused on abandoning boats, environmental, anchor outs, you name it, it was a laundry list. And so we now have a draft, and it goes through an ordinance code process now, because it is an official legal statement that we have to bring to the board. And it takes about another 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
And so we're in, it's in process. It just takes time. And that actually will help our outer harbor, if it's approved, it'll help our outer harbor water issues, as well as just some other things to improve legally and what have you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, a couple more things here. I noticed that we have a security guard tonight. Is that something that the district is now paying for, and does the board need to approve those costs? Is this gonna be an ongoing thing at meetings? Just wondering what, I hadn't heard about it, so just wondering what the status is. General Manager Grinnell, could you?
I'll have Mr. Grinnell answer that, but first, here's my understanding of it, is that there were some folks who felt threatened at the last meeting because of some hostility that they felt, and I was asked by the general manager whether or not, it would be a good idea to have law enforcement to make sure that there's no disorderly conduct at the meeting. And I felt that if there are people who feel threatened, we should have safety in our meetings. And so that's why I had approved that. Mr. Grinnell?
I have nothing to add.
Okay. But that's basically what happened.
And so, does the board need to approve the cost, or, what's this, it's like a change, and I haven't heard
Yes.
anything about it, so what's the process for that?
Well, I think the question for the board is, how long we would like to have law enforcement at our meetings. And as far as I'm concerned, just for the record, if there are people, if anyone feels unsafe at these meetings, whether it's a member of the public, staff, or commissioners, we should have law enforcement here, because I don't want anyone feeling unsafe at our meetings.
So I know, like, at other public meetings that I go to, oftentimes if there's a concern by a board or council or commission, they will ask their local law enforcement to show up. And we did have Lisa Williams here earlier, but obviously she was here to receive a certificate from this board, not to work. So in the past, when we've needed law enforcement at a particularly heated local meeting, I've noticed that with some local boards, they'll contact the local sheriff's department, and then in this case, it would have been Lieutenant Lisa Williams who would have dispatched a sheriff to a local meeting to be present during the meeting. So in the past, I've seen that happen a number of different times. And the nice thing about that is there was an additional cost because that was part of that, that was considered part of their duty. So there wasn't any additional cost. So I'm wondering if this is something that is just local law enforcement showing up to make a presence at the meeting, or if this is an additional service that the board is paying, that the district is paying for.
It's a good question. I'm going to direct that to Mr.
Yeah,
Grinnell to
no,
explain that.
district will cover the cost, as we have in previous times when we did this, in past years.
Thank you. And just also for the record, we are in the South San Francisco Chamber,
Right.
and the South San Francisco Police Department is just like 50 meters that way. So I'm hoping we're not going to have coast-side law enforcement here, because that would be a pretty hefty bill to have coast-side law enforcement.
There would be no reason to.
So, but does that, yes?
Well, that's a really interesting point. I do recall that, that South San Francisco, their police department is right here in this very building where we're sitting. Did it occur to the general manager to contact the South San Francisco police force and ask them to have an officer present at the meeting tonight free of charge? Did we look into whether that was a possibility? Because I know that that was the case at a recent South San Francisco City Council meeting. Law enforcement was here, in uniform during a meeting, and just to kind of keep the peace and hold the space. Is that something that the district looked into?
It was looked into and it wasn't possible.
What came of that?
What?
Why wasn't it possible?
Because we were told that there would be a charge.
What was the charge?
I don't know yet, but it will be minimal.
For South San Francisco police, it would be minimal?
Yes.
But are we paying for security tonight?
Yes.
Okay, and is it South San Francisco's police force that we're
Yes.
Oh, okay, so they are here tonight?
Yes.
Okay, and so you don't know what the fee is, but you've been told
Correct.
it's minimal? Okay, well, that clears up.
Yeah, I would imagine it would depend on how long our meeting is, right? I mean, it's probably hourly or something, I'm sure. I don't know
The
exactly.
longer the meeting, the longer the course.
Okay, thanks for the clarification on that. I think that is it for me for statements. Yep.
Thank you. Commissioner? Carbone? Commissioner Tucker?
Thank you. Just a couple of thoughts. A fisherman contacted me and asked me what I knew about the 94-foot rule. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, well, it's his understanding that a 94-foot rule exists, that no boat larger than 94 feet can tie up at the outer Johnson Pier for loading or unloading of fish or materials. So I contacted the harbor master and asked him, and he contacted staff, and nobody seemed to know what the 94-foot rule. And for the almost 16 years that I've been here, I had never heard of that before. Well, in checking with the general manager, it turns out that there's an 80-foot rule that is somehow buried in the leases for the fish buyers. And what that is that no boat over 80 foot in size may tie up there and unload or load. However, there is one caveat, that the harbor master at his leisure or persuasion may give a variance to that rule. So I come here now making this statement to staff who are listening, that I don't think we should have an 80-foot or a 94-foot or a 96-foot or a 16-foot rule denying people the opportunity to tie up on an area that would handle a 100-foot boat if it had to. So that's item number one. But knowing that there's a way without going back into the leases to get around that, I would beseech the harbor master to be able to put himself in a position to say that he can grandfather other boats to come in there. Because we don't want to deny anybody access to load or unload. That's the 94-foot rule. It's, boy, my colleagues a little bit of education that I certainly didn't have. Also, staying in the same general location, once the electrical, which we've already put out to bid or about to put out to bid, is done by the maintenance building, the plan is to move those freezers off Johnson Pier at the end to give the fish buyers and the general public just a little more room down there, some safety habits. And once that's done, I think I'd like to see us put a third hoist out at the end, closer to, in my mind, closer to where the fuel and the ice containers are. We're going to have the one that's on there now. We're going to have the second one from Three Captains, and I understand the electrical has already been run for that. But that location seems to be feasible once this commission approves it. And I think there's room for a third public hoist. And I think that's important because the only hoist now is backed by the harbor master's office, and that's just so very shallow and inconvenient, it doesn't make sense. I think we have to open it up to the public and give them an opportunity to come in there and either load or unload as they will. And the third item that I go back and forth on, quite frankly, but just as we're just throwing things out, we had the plan from Dan Temco days regarding the widening of the sidewalks by the concessionaires. I don't know that we've taken a position on that lately, but I think I find myself supporting that. And I think I'd like to see us do something with the sidewalk widening. We've overcome the parking problem because we're allowed to put in
smaller parking stalls now for the custom cars or the minor cars, if you will. And I think I'd like to see those sidewalks opened up to give us a breath of fresh air down there and to allow the concessionaires possibly to do more business and to certainly put tables out there. So that's an item that tonight we can't do anything about, but it's an item that sits there for $100 and something thousand, and I think we should find the money to do that. And I'm not asking for any vote tonight, but I'm just bringing that to your attention. At some future agenda, I'm going to ask that that be re-agendized and that we make a decision as a board on that. That's all I had, and I thank you for your attention and for your time.
Thank you. Commissioner Holsinger.
Yes, thank you. I have two things I'd like to address. First, I'd like to welcome the Kerrs and wish you good luck and all the best for the operation of your houseboat. I had some concerns about, I thought temporary tryout was good. I had some concerns about it being a full year, just because it's such an uncertainty. This is such a new territory for the Harbor District to embark upon. And I would just simply tell you that it's the kind of thing I'd like to have available personally. So I welcome that. I wish you all the best, and I hope it's a success and you can establish a model that we can follow. The other thing I'd like to address is starting out by thanking the staff that we have for their hard work in the time that I've served on the Harbor District, both on the Harbor Commission, both this year and last year. And I would like to note that a year and a half ago, I expressed my concern and interest that the West Trail be a priority for attention, renovation, upgrading, the cost of it and so forth, making it safe and secure. And the commission at that point in time was virtually unanimous in saying, yes, it was a priority. And I want to note that I still believe that, and I think the staff still believes that, but I also respect and recognize, because we have staff that we rely upon and we invest our trust and faith in, that they're making it the priority that is available based upon the resources we have, based upon all the other demands that we face with our Harbor District in both Oyster Point and in Pillar Point. And so if we're going to have priorities, I just simply suggest that that one's a year and a half old. We're having some erosion and some problems with the trail that are going to be taken care of temporarily. And from what I understand from staff, because I check with them on a regular basis, and I go out, check all the facilities regularly, that's in the queue, so to speak. And I want to thank you for that, and just commend you on the juggling act you're doing with all these different economic and policy and public service priorities. Thank you.
Mr. President, if I might make a brief point of information regarding Commissioner Holsinger's last statement, as an update, because I think indeed that is such an important priority topic. We've been held up by staff reorganizations in the Coastal Commission. We've been trying to get them to proceed on an emergency permit so we can actually start repairs while we do the full project process. We were told just a couple of days ago that there is a new North Central District manager who fortunately is someone who I have a long working experience with, and someone who is coming from their regulatory branch is exactly what we need now to expedite a permit. And so we are now looking forward to actually proceeding on repairing that real soon. I cannot give you a date because we don't have a permit yet, but as you know, money has been budgeted for that project for this fiscal year. And so we can expect to move quickly on that. And that's the kind of top priority that truly engages staff now, because that has maximum public impact. And we were cheered by the coastal staff saying, when we said, if we can't repair this now, we may have to close the trail down. They said, oh, don't do that. So they're on board. So I just wanted you, Commissioner, and all of you to know that, in fact, it is moving.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay. And I have one item Well, first of all, just a couple of quick things, actually. First of all is more of a point of information, and during the break, I actually brought this up to Mr. Grinnell and Mr. Reese. There was a member of the public who was like kind of congratulating me on the end of my my term as presidency, and I did become president in the June-July timeframe. And so my understanding was that it was a year term. And so I would just like to ask staff, when you have the time, because we have one more meeting left in the end of the year, I'd like to know before January what the case is. If you could pull the tapes and look at the videotapes, my understanding was that it was a year because to make it fair for any commissioner who becomes president, that you have a full year's term versus 6 months. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was the installation meeting, or the meeting after that. It's one of those two. And we were still videotaping at the time, so hopefully you could still get those videos. Okay?
We'll check.
And then thank you for that point of information item. And then the other thing is, I just wanted to wish everyone, including staff, a very happy Thanksgiving. I know it's been a very, very challenging year in a lot of ways, and I know that everyone's been working hard, including staff, commissioners, and the public, who continue to be our watchdogs, and they should continue to be our watchdogs, and keep us on our feet. So I know everyone's been working hard, and now we have South San Francisco law enforcement here working hard. So I just want to thank everyone and happy Thanksgiving to all of you. So on that note, we are now at item 16. I have one public comment. So I don't know why it says my name here for the report. I don't have a report for a district real property negotiator, but Mr. Reese, can you please explain the sort of the legal protocol with regards to, before you go into discussions of real estate, how you must identify a negotiator and how that works, and does it have to, is that person a placeholder for some other person you could hire later on, just for the public's benefit? Can you explain real property negotiator and what that is?
Sure. So the real property negotiator really could be anyone. Common practice is to have your chief executive be your real property negotiator. That just makes the most sense because they are the one in charge of running the operations of the business, and it just makes the most sense that they would be the person negotiating with somebody over a piece of real property. When you're going to go into closed session to discuss the negotiations that you are directing your real property negotiator to have, you announce to the public, pursuant to the Brown Act, that you are going into closed session for that purpose, and that your real property negotiator is the person who is listed on the agenda, and you make the announcement going into the closed session that is the purpose of the closed session. You then give the direction that you want to give to that person, and then they go out and actually handle the negotiation on your behalf.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Mr. President, then I would nominate Peter Grinnell to be our property negotiator.
Okay. I hear a nomination. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
I have a question.
Question.
So we're about to go into closed session, which is agenda item 17, regarding two separate issues. There is a property at 504 Alhambra Road in El Granada, that's one. And the second item is the Pillar Point Pillar Point Harbor fish buying leases with Pillar Point Seafood, 3 Captains Sea Products, Morningstar Fisheries at Johnson Pier. So those are two separate closed session items. This is a question for Kai. Shouldn't we identify a real property negotiator for each of those individual items included in closed session, not just one blanket negotiator?
It's really at the option of the board. If you want to have Peter be your real property negotiator for both negotiations, you can simply announce that and go into closed session and handle both items. If you wanted 2 separate real property negotiators, then my recommendation to you would be to go into closed session on the one item with the one negotiator, then adjourn that closed session, re-adjourn in a second closed session, report that out to the public, re-adjourn in a second closed session with your second real property negotiator, and then have that discussion with just that person.
Mr. President, for convenience sake, then with the permission of my second, I would move to nominate Peter Grinnell for both items.
I have another question.
I agree.
Okay, I hear a motion and second, and so we have questions, and I still have a public comment on this.
Oh, okay.
Yes, so,
Well,
Commissioner
maybe we
Brennan, your
should take
question?
the comment before.
Would you mind?
No.
Because I took it out of order, I'm sorry. Normally we have the report, then we have public comment. Mr. Rogers, please.
All right, well, my comments are a little out of order now, because there's already a motion. But basically, I have a few concerns about who you're nominating for your real property negotiator. That individual has, in recent past, been made false statements on his reports, misrepresenting the cost of moving, clearly making it public that he's not interested in making the move. And yet, he's now the one that you're going to have negotiating for the possibility of acquiring a new piece of property to move to. I'm not sure that's in your best interest when the individual has made it so clear that they're not interested in making that move. Would they really negotiate in your best interest? So, I mean, I can go into the details, but you all here for the reports. He included the purchase of equipment and furniture, fixtures, into moving costs, and then represented it as that would be a cost that he'd incur again when he moved. Which, you know, you're not going to have those costs this time. And if you acquire that property, which looks like a really good site for you, you don't need new furniture to move there. You don't need new equipment to move there. So I don't understand why those were represented in there, and I don't understand why you would appoint that individual to again negotiate that property on that particular topic, because it's obvious that they're not in favor of it. So that was my question, or comments and concerns, but the motion is there. All right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have another speaker card on this item. Ms. Cartwright.
Strangely enough, I agree with him. Who would think that would happen? And now here come the four horsemen. But I do. And actually, I was going to say something a little bit different, but it's basically the same points. The fishermen have long held that he has not negotiated in good faith with them, that he has said one thing and then turned around and completely denied ever making those deals. So I think that he has not negotiated in good faith with fishermen, so he should not be the real property negotiator for the fishermen. And then he has long held, and when you guys have said, like, no, let's not do that, he has slammed his book and like, fine, that's what you want. And that's how he's behaved, like a spoiled child, when you didn't do what he wanted to do regarding moving. So if this is how he wants to act regarding your decisions with moving, then I don't think that he's the person who's gonna go ahead and do it. Am I gonna be like, you know, your public person that you're gonna have out there like doing all your public press releases? Probably not. So it's kind of the same idea. If somebody's not going to act in your best interest, then why have them negotiate in your interest? But then again, you keep having him as your general manager, so it's kind of the same idea. So that's all. I just don't think that he's going to negotiate in good faith. I don't think that he acts in good faith. So he's not going to act in the best interest of the fishermen, and that's what they've said several times. He agreed to one thing, he turned around and did the complete different thing. So why should the fishermen believe that he's going to act in good faith this time? And when he hasn't gotten his way as far as moving, you've seen how he's acted. So why would he act in good faith for you guys right now? I don't think so. He's dug in his heels, he doesn't want to move. He likes his toys the way they are. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I make
Question? So yes, we have the motion and the second, so now we're in questions, because I just took the public's comments because I forgot them. Commissioner Brennan.
Thank you. So I'd like to suggest we do something that might be a little bit easier than what Kai recommended if we were going to do two separate votes for identifying a real property negotiator. just to make it simpler, I would like to have 2 separate votes for that, because I want it to be clear how I'm voting on each of the 2 closed session items.
Commissioner, just in terms of the point of order, we would have to vote on this first, on the motion, and then see how the outcome is, and then take a look at your
Okay.
motion.
Okay.
That's how we have to do it in terms of Robert's rules, is we have to take this motion first, because there's already a motion and a
But you
second.
can make an amendment to a motion.
If the person who made the motion will agree to the amendment. So, did you want to, I'm sorry.
It
I know I
sounds like
can-
the amendment would be contradictory to the
It
motion.
sounds like it to me too, so.
The amendment would be to separate it into 2 separate votes.
Right, but they just combine them, so.
That's
So, okay, so let's just tackle this motion first. Let's do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Brennan?
No.
Commissioner Holsinger?
Aye.
Commissioner Paravano?
Aye.
Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
President Bernardo?
No. So the motion passes. Okay, so we will have then Mr. Grinnell as the real property negotiator for both of these items. Okay?
Move to go into closed session.
Motion second. All in favor of going into closed session, say aye. Aye. Okay, we are officially in closed session.
About the security people. Yeah, because of that little thing we saw last week, at the last meeting, when you guys talked to them. Yeah, Folker got scared. That's what it was about. Who else got scared?
I guess, I was wondering. Okay.
We get this thing shut down.